Right. Okay, we are recording. Hi, y'all. I am very excited this evening to be here with Masa Melhem. She is getting her bachelor's degree in law at the University of Essex, and she is currently in Colchester, which is south of London, but she is originally from Palestine. So thank you. And I met her through Gabriel, who I interviewed a few months ago, actually. So thank you for that connection, Gabriel. Thank you, Masa, for talking to me this evening.
No worries. I'm really excited.
Well, this morning, your time. So it's 10 a.m. where you are. So we'll start off with a little bit about the basics. Tell me which city in Palestine you're from and what it was like for you living there.
So when people ask where I'm from, it's kind of hard to answer, but I'm raised in Palestine, in Ramallah, from Ramallah. Like I've lived most of my life in Ramallah. But my dad's from this village called, or city now, called Halhul. It's in Hebron.
Okay.
And my mom's from Nablus, and I was born in Nablus, so a little bit from north and south and living in the center.
Okay, cool. I wouldn't know where any any of those places are, I admit. So you've lived in different parts of Palestine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's that?
Mostly Ramallah though, just
okay.
Basically, but from different sites.
And what was that? What was it like living there?
In Ramallah, it's nice. It's like the city. It's like the cool part of Palestine, of the West Bank.
Okay.
But you know, it's in the West Bank at the end of the day.
Okay, what does that mean?
There's only so much that that it can go, like as far as it can go. At the end of the day, the thing for us isn't the greatest thing if you were in the UK or if you were to be somewhere else. But
right.
It's not too bad.
Right. You mentioned that you lived in the US for a little while, because I thought you sounded a little bit like you had an accent from the United States.
Yeah. So I it's just a small part of my life. Like right when I was like 4 and 5, I have relatives in the US, and so we went there for like 6 months, and then
right.
So it was just a bit of that, and then got back to Palestine.
All right. So you've been speaking English for a lot of your life as well.
Yeah, because the school that I went to also had like an English section and an Arabic section. I went to the English section, so mostly English.
So you can speak both.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. You are currently in the UK. How long have you been in the UK?
Since December.
Okay.
But then I've been there before, but after Corona at least.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were back in Palestine during a lot of the pandemic?
Yeah. So I headed back home around end of March. I like tried extending it as much as possible. I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave.
Okay.
So like the end of March, like around 20 something of March, and then I got back December. Here.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So did you have to go back?
Yeah, I really didn't have a choice. Even though I stocked up and I was like, yeah, parents, I'll see you. It's okay. It's just a pandemic. It should be fine. And then, I stocked up and went shopping, and all my groceries just went to waste. I had to like give away most of it. And then my parents were like, nah, this is the last flight. Israel is announcing that they're closing the airport, so you don't really have much of an option. And so I had 24 hours to pack up an entire, like, what I thought was going to be like months in Palestine. So,
yeah. And it was, I guess, April, May, till the end of the year. Interesting. So what Israel did impacted your travel? And I remember Laura might have mentioned that as well. So you get to Palestine via Israel?
So usually I would go to Israel, but sometimes I'd go through Jordan as well. It just depends if I could get a permit or not.
Right. Was that an interesting journey going back from the UK to? I mean, is it worth talking about? Would you like to share that with us? I could imagine it might be a little bit interesting.
Interesting. I mean, obviously, like we went through Israel, and there was like a whole, like it was very chaotic. And generally speaking, going through Israel is always dreadful. Like, not because of anything, but I've personally had like some of the worst experiences of my life in the airport. Like, I've
Really?
previously, the last time I went through the airport which would be around like December time, I was like fully like assaulted in like the security station and everything, and they would just, it was absolutely chaotic, from A to Z. They took my phone, they took everything, they took my wallet, and then they just gave me my passport, and they're like, go on your flight. And so I was dreading the experience of going through that airport again, and dreading it having to go through that with Corona as well. But it was very like the only bad experience. I didn't have a problem at security because most security was in the UK, but my only bad experience was actually reaching Ben Gurion, which is the airport. Like, once I've arrived there, one of the guys, they were like walking in like a group, and he just turns back and he goes in my face, like he's just coughing, and it obviously was a start.
Oh.
And it was just very weird, and you can't really say much, and I just kept moving, but they were just all entirely mocking me. That was just that. But then right after you get through Israel, you obviously have to, I got in a cab and I had to get to the West Bank. And then once I got to the West Bank, there was a cab, there was police cars that were at the entrance, because the way Palestine handled it at the start was really well. And so they stopped me and they took me into quarantine. Like, I didn't even get to see my parents. They were just like, nope. And then we went to a hotel, and there I stayed for 2 weeks.
All right. So they were doing quarantine, like mandatory quarantine.
Mandatory, yeah. You weren't allowed to see anyone. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting, because they do that in Australia, where I am, and I'm from the United States originally, and I keep banging on about how important it is to make it mandatory, that you can't just tell people to go home and quarantine, that you have to have a hotel, you have to have it enforced. In Australia, they have guards. I don't know if they have guards in Palestine.
We had so many guards and police cars and everything, and they were like 3 cars. It was such a movie scene. It was just like following me, and I was in the middle, and ooh, to the
oh my gosh,
it was crazy. But back then we had like six corona cases at that point. Like, we didn't have anything. Like, it was so under control, and I was actually really proud. Like, I left from the UK, and the UK it just started like, and so I get to Palestine, and they have it so under control, and the hotel's treating you really well, and they were very nice, and it was all free and out of charge, like free of charge. So it was really nice. They gave you 3 meals a day. There was Wi-Fi. You had like a whole suite for yourself. It was really nice for Palestine as well, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Did they continue to do that throughout? Are they still doing it now? Do you know?
No, they stopped after. It was actually crazy. They wouldn't let me go even a day earlier. I tried like speaking to them, like please just I'm dying. Let me go. And then they were like, no, strictly 2 weeks. And they test you at the start and test you in the like at the end as well to double check. And then after your test result comes in, that's when they let you go. But they wouldn't let me go. And then after 5-6 days of me leaving, they announced that it's no longer mandatory. And I was like, well.
Oh my gosh. I wonder why they stopped.
I think it was funding. It was
they had no money. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a hotel, and then after that, next thing you know, they started announcing a day afterwards that they were also taking other hotels in Ramallah and in the cities nearby, because there was just too many people coming in. And then I think they just could not afford it anymore.
Yeah, it's an amazing solution, but it's a very expensive solution. And at first, Australia was paying for people to have this quarantine for free. And now anyone who's trying to get back in the country, and we still have a backlog of people trying to get in, you have to be willing to pay $3,000 of your own money to quarantine, and they won't let you back in unless you can pay that money. So yeah, it's a complicated thing. But it sounds like you must have been frustrated that you came back and did the work, and then they were like, the money ran out.
Yeah.
That's also really we kind of just blazed over the fact that you had like such a terrible experience at the airport. And I don't really want to make you focus on that, but why is that what happened to you? Is that a common experience? Like why would they do that?
I could explain what happened, generally speaking.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I don't want it to be upsetting for you.
No, it should be fine. I didn't really ever I didn't think I'd talk about it publicly just because I didn't want it to be like something that could come back and bite me. I don't know. In my mind, it just seemed like if I talk about it and I address it, then when I go through the airport, it's there. I'm gonna, you know, red dot her. She's the one.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Just at the end of the day, it was I don't know. I think you're not supposed to be that much of a talkative person, and generally about the conflict, and I think that's what I kind of tend to do when I go to uni. There's solidarity groups and stuff like that, so I'm just it's a university group. It's not much but I knew that it would cause some sort of problem when I go through the airport. They would not want that, and so I knew eventually it was going to cause a problem. And when I went back the first time to Palestine, after I went to uni, it wasn't a problem. The airport went smoothly. The security was just the usual security. Palestinians on their own line and everything, but it was usual. But there's this one time that started it going downhill, and it was just I was leaving from Palestine to the UK, and I came a couple of hours early, and I actually was late to uni a week and a half because I had a procedure in Palestine. So I was really sick, but I had to make it back to the UK, and I was really I wanted to get back. I just wanted to get back to my study space and everything, and I actually walked out of a procedure because they gave me a permit that day. And to apply to a permit, I had to wait 2 weeks because there was Jewish holidays as well in between. So I genuinely walked out of a procedure at 8:45, 9:15, I was on my way to the hospital. So obviously walking out of procedure, empty stomach, all of that. So I was already very sick and very tired, but I still wanted to get to the UK. Just wanted to get there and just, call it a day. Just so obviously from the start, every minor thing that the usual racist or discrimination of oh, you're Palestinian, stand over there, was getting on my nerves a little extra because I was sick. Everything was just annoying me.
Right.
I just did not put up a show. I didn't my way through this. I was just so tired. I just could not. Once we got security, that wasn't the greatest. Once we got security, she does my thing. Nothing beeps. She wipes on your shoes and checks and everything. Nothing beeps. And then she says, well, you need to go into the interrogation side because something beeped, but nothing really did. I was with you, nothing did. We go there, and the lady starts by grabbing AirPods, and she goes, what is this? And I'm like, oh, they're AirPods. She's like, you're not allowed to have this in an airport, right? And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to. And she's like, no, you're not allowed to. We're taking this. And she puts it in a basket, and I'm at this point I'm just very confused. And then she grabs my power bank. Everyone has a power. I swear everyone has a power bank. And she's like, what is this? And I was like, it's a power bank. She goes, how does it work? And I'm like, you click that and it charges. She's like, yeah, no, you're not allowed to carry this. And she puts it in that, and I was like, okay. And then we start going through the whole bag, and she starts taking out my jewelry, and it was when someone's trying to upset you, and you can tell they're So she opens my jewelry box, and I usually put my jewelry in my carry-on because I just don't trust it in my check-in, because it's every piece of jewelry means a lot to me, because it's usually gifts. So she opens my jewelry box, and then she goes and she flips it entirely, and everything's falling, and I'm seeing certain pieces on the ground, and I'm like, no, but you dropped that. No, but you pick that up. Why is that on the ground? And she doesn't pick a lot of them up. She just goes, and it was genuinely and I obviously I'm sick. I am so sick, and I'm so tired. The last thing I need is this. But at this point I'm just silent because I knew it was going to go long. At this point I think I went through over an hour, And then next thing you know, she starts opening up. Oh, my carry-on also had my straightener because it was really heavy and moved it for my check-in. And then she goes, "You're not allowed to carry this." And I was like, "No, but I've done this before. People are allowed to carry like electronics, but I just put them in a side. Like I put my electronics on a side. I didn't have any form of liquids whatsoever. I just had the stuff that would be separated. Like she took a charger out. She said, "You're not allowed to carry this." And when she's telling you you're not allowed to carry this, I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like
You're a professional. Yeah.
Like I'm like, no, that makes no sense. And she's like, no, you're just not allowed to. And then we concluded that with her taking my phone and she put it on the thing, and well, she had it, but she just put it completely inside the box. And then she took my wallet from my bag and she put it there as well. And then she goes, get into the machine. I get into the machine, and there's this 18-year-old girl. I can tell like she's a girl because she just started. And she starts going, hands up, whatever, into the machine. And I'm wearing like these Adidas trousers that have like a zipper on the pocket.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, it's ringing by your hips." And I'm like, "Oh, it's just a zipper." And I'm like showing it to her. She goes, "Okay, go back in the machine. I'll tell them there's a zipper." And then I go back in the machine, and obviously it's extra radiation, like at least at this point 3-4 times. And I know that should not be legal. This is my 4th time going through radiation. I went through another, and I'm so sick. I am so tired at this point. I don't want to be standing up like this in the same position for like a solid 3 minutes. And then I stand back out, and she goes, "No, there's something there." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can check. It's a pocket and there's a zipper." And she, without any hesitation, there's a room, by the way, where there's like a curtain. Yeah, she didn't care. Usually people go in there. She just undid my thingies and my trousers, and she just stuck her hands fully, and it was so horrible from A to Z. I know they check bodily and they explain that they're going to do that, but she didn't. She just stuffed her, and I was like, "Bro, what are you doing?" She was touching me up differently, and I was like, "That's my bone." And she literally grabs my hip bone. I was like, "What is this?" I'm like, "That's my hip bone." You just called me skinny, but that's my hip bone. It was the worst part about that was that I was surrounded by soldiers. For some odd reason, the interrogation lady found it really interesting. I was so like such a threat that I specifically had to have soldiers around me. And it was
they were watching this happen?
They were watching this. There was 4 guys literally surrounding me, and I was like, I don't feel comfortable. My hip bone sticking out, you diving into my pants, and just 4 guys. It was
my horrible. God. That's got to be a crime. It was yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And was there anything that could be done? Like, is that a common thing? I would like to hope that's like a freak situation.
Apparently it really increased with the pandemic as well. But the problem was when I realized that no one will actually take responsibility for any of this, was they call the manager, right? Because I start going, I need a manager. I can't you can't keep doing this to me. What are you doing? Like, this doesn't make sense. At this point, by the way, I passed like 3-4 hours waiting there. I just came early, like I said, because of the permit. Like I was allowed at the airport at a certain time. So I came early for my flight, way earlier for my flight, but they took that as a
way to
so 3-4 hours, me being sick, 0 food in my stomach, I have a fever and I'm tired. They're going through this. So they call the manager, and she comes and she starts yelling them in Hebrew, and she starts clicking her things. So she's like recording and asking me, and she's like, "There's a lot of medical reports in that bag. Should I be concerned?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just a little sick and I need them when I get back to the UK so I can give them to my GP." And then she starts going, "You're sick." And I was like, "There's no way someone's mocking me right now. There's no way in hell." And she was proper mocking it. They all started laughing. And I was like, "There is no way."
Oh my God.
She stood, it was so horrible. And next thing you know, she starts yelling. She's like, "Yeah, go to your flight." And I'm like, "Okay, give me my phone and my stuff." And she's like, No, you're not taking these." And I was like, "What? Like, I need my phone and stuff." She's like, No, go to your flight. Here's your passport, go." And I was like, "That's not how it works. I have a transit in Turkey for 3 hours, and then I have to get to the UK, and I have a bus ticket on my phone. I have nothing was adding up." And she's like, No, you're not taking your phone. You're not taking anything. Go, or I'm canceling your flight." And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's 2 minutes left for your flight to take off. You're the last passenger that's not there. I'm canceling your flight right now, or you're going." I'm like, "I need my phone." She's like, no, you're not taking your phone. You're not taking anything. Nothing from this you're taking. Here's your passport. I'm like, can I get money? She's like, no. And I'm like, please, like, I just money, whatever. Can I at least get like my residence permit? It's in my wallet. Like, I don't even have the visa to enter the UK. Can I get that? And she's like, take it real quick. So I took it out, but I took money with it. And then she goes, no, you can't take anything else. And I'm like, please, like my phone, I need it, my ticket. She was like, no, you're not going to take it. And at this point, I'm like crying. I have no idea what the hell to do. And this girl grabs me. She's like, to the plane. I get to the plane, and everyone's death staring me because I'm late to the plane. I sit on the plane, get to Turkey, don't have a phone, don't have anything. And I ask the people, and I was like, where do I get my phone? Where do I get anything? And they say, oh, go to the passenger belt. I go to the passenger belt, which is all the way at the end of the airport, which means out the airport. It's not there. I ask a lady what time it is. She says it's 3 minutes, 4 minutes before my flight. I panic. I rush back, and I use that money to pay this dodgy guy to let me through a fast track. I go through a fast track all the way from the start of the airport. I get to the plane, and I still don't have my phone. Get to the UK, and I find my phone hanging there between a bunch of bags on the wrong passenger thingy. What's the bag
conveyor belt thing?
Yeah. Belt. It was just on the wrong one, hanging there, zero charge, no charge whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, my laptop, she took my laptop, forgot to mention that. And my bag, I found my backpack, and it was ripped. Like the arm was literally fully ripped like this, because obviously you put a backpack that was not meant to be between a bunch of luggage bags, and it was ripped entirely. My laptop, which I just recently got as a gift, was like scratched up on the sides, and it was just fresh and new, and it was just so disappointing from A to Z. I didn't get my power bank and AirPods and straightener and a lot of that, but I had that, so I quickly asked some guy to charge my phone, and then I managed to make it to my bus literally right before they were about to go. And it was just, I called my parents.
Poor thing. I'm so sorry.
No worries. It was just, I just called my parents, and they were like, well, who are you? My mom was absolutely so upset and sad.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't tell your parents.
Yeah.
But who do you tell? Who do you complain to? Like, who will I complain to? These are security measures in their eyes. So what did I? Do you get what I mean? And obviously with the pandemic, a lot of people have been saying this has been actually very recurrent. Like I know a lot of people, when they left through Israel, and they're half Israeli, half Palestinian as well, which is what confuses me. But they left through Israel, and they also went through the same thing. So,
right. I think there's a lot of really terrifying situations, particularly like when I heard about Trump introducing the Muslim ban, and how it gives people who are working these jobs, often it's low paid, and they kind of, similar to police officers, sometimes this idea of a small amount of power that they want to use in terrible kind of ways. It's really terrifying too, because people are like, when you're traveling, you're extra vulnerable. Like, these people can let you go or not. Like, you're at their mercy, like you were. So it's super disturbing. It's so do you think and how old are you, Masa?
I just turned 20.
Okay, so you're very young, and do you think this girl that was, and when was that, a few years ago, or was that like
this was, it should have been end of 2019. It should have been from Palestine to
Right. And this girl was like the same age as you that was doing it. Right.
She definitely a lot younger as well. Like, I had to tell the machines.
Yeah. And do you think that, so what happens, and this was at the airport, the Israel airport, do you think that it is specific, often there's, I guess, a bigger picture question, do people get targeted because they're Palestinian regularly? Yeah.
The second you see your they see your Palestinian passport, you know the treatment's completely different. And I tend to, and everyone I usually know tends to hide it. Like, if you get your Palestinian passport, you usually flip it like by your phone and just not show that, because you know the treatment's going to be different. It's 100% going to be different.
Why?
The conflict, I guess. And it's like, I've heard this before as well. It was this idea in Israel that's like, oh, like you guys are so against us, but you're using our airport. It's really odd, but I like, it was a thing, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think my dad said this to me. We had like, there was a Palestine event throughout summer, and they were asking us like, what do you think this pandemic made you realize, like for Palestine at least, or like for you, for like home?
Yeah.
And we realized how important and how much of how deep it is that we don't, and we're not allowed to have our own airport. That's
Right.
when we realized the worth of
Yes.
having our airport, because obviously you know how so many countries like cut like all travel because when the pandemic started. So a lot of Palestinian students were stuck because a lot of them couldn't get permits to Israeli airports, and Israel closed their airport, and Jordan wasn't letting Palestinian citizens on board till like end of summer. So Palestinians didn't even have an airport to begin with. They couldn't say, oh, our students come back. Their students were actually stuck. There was a whole pandemic and they were stuck abroad. So
Right.
we kind of understood the value of airports.
Do you think that could happen? Of airport could be built or something?
Right, but they've been like asking for one for the longest time.
Right.
Not allowed to.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you came back, when you were able to come back in December,
yeah,
what was that an okay experience?
It was obviously it was the same. You get taken to the interrogation center, but that's the usual. Like you can't. I'm comparing it from what I would usually experience, and that's the usual.
Right.
I just didn't experience as bad as I've experienced that 2000.
Right.
It was just that I said coughed, and everything else was just normal.
But it's so terrifying because now, like, you know, traveling was for a lot of people, for me, one of the most beautiful, exciting things. I mean, I have had people rude to me, particularly in LA airport sometimes, but overall, it's supposed to be, I mean, it's never always glamorous in some ways, but at the same time, it's like, it's supposed, I believe travel is a good thing for the world. And it's a good way to make connections and meet people different from you, and to think about, like, you know, the ways that different people can use it for terror and evil is just really, really disturbing. And I hope that that never happens again. And I don't know how you even, like, you know, I guess it's important to tell your story honestly, so that people can see that this is probably, unfortunately, something that might happen on a regular basis. That's another really disturbing part of it. Well, I'm glad you were able to make it through, and I hope that everyone in, I guess it would be Heathrow, or were kind to you.
They were definitely nice. Yeah, they were
nice. Maybe to take it down a notch, we got very intense there very quickly. What was it like when you got back to Palestine? Like once you made it across the border and after you got out of quarantine, how did you feel the country was reacting to everything?
I think generally speaking, the country was doing it really well. Like I said, like they were in full lockdown, and like full, when they say lockdown, it's not like US lockdown or UK lockdown. Like UK, everyone's still going about. But when they say lockdown, like lockdown, there's not a single car in the streets, and if there's a car in the streets, you have a reason to be in the streets. Like there's a valid reason. So it was empty streets. And then I got home, and it was obviously like, your parents have been in lockdown for a minute, so they've like created this like routine. There was like card games at night, and like a meal. It was very nice. It was comforting. It was good to be home. It was really nice.
That's good. And you just stayed home the whole time?
So the first month or so was still in lockdown, and then things, you know, the fear for corona as well started going down, and you started seeing people as well. So I started hanging out with my friends again, but it was still like very social distancing. Coffee shops were still like closed at a curfew and stuff, but there was a little bit of normal, and then we'll go back into lockdown. All over.
So do you think, and now that you're back in the UK and there's like the new strain that is more contagious, did you feel, so you've been in kind of both places, do you feel that, so you think that Palestine was much more stay at home than the UK?
100%.
Right.
Even though, and I've said this to people in the UK here as well, in Palestine, our economy is crashing. That we have nothing. There's no money going around, and because of the idea to stay home, you're not allowed to work, not allowed to anything. People that were low-income families and people that were based on, for example, like transportation, and people that lived off being taxi drivers and stuff, they were getting really furious, and we could tell there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of political tension.
Right.
And people were getting really mad at the government every time there was a lockdown. Like, you guys can make it, but we can't afford this. We can't afford a lockdown. Which is why they stopped making that many lockdowns, and that's why the cases actually went like upwards, because they had to make a living. But in the UK, on the other hand, like when they say lockdown, they don't really implement. And with the whole new strain, not that many measures have been taken to deal with that. It's
that's what I mean, it's the same in the United States as well. I feel like a lot of people, it's kind of like Gabriel was telling me, he hasn't left his house with his mom, but like it's like every person for themselves. So either you decide to stay in or you give up, kind of. It's like which is quite disappointing, because I feel like in Australia we've handled it very well, and it's been a combination of a lot of good fortune, but also people did take it seriously. And now we have like a 5-day lockdown in one state when it happens, but it's ultimately, I feel like, managed a lot better. But like I said, a lot of stars aligned. We're a very low population country. We're just like we have a lot of money. We're a very rich country. So was there, you talked about people getting angry. Was there political conflict? Did you see protests and stuff like that?
There was protests, but not towards our government at one point. There was protests because the annexation was happening at the same time. Israel was decided publicly that they wanted to annex another chunk of Palestine. And there was that protest, but obviously protest with COVID-19, that was a mess. So people try to social distance, but like I've walked by one, and I didn't want to be in the crowd because my mom would kill me. But there was just there was a lot of anger because of the annexation, but then there was also a lot of anger at the government. Like, why are you not doing anything? And obviously the government is coming from such a weak position. I do know that they've also like asked big businesses and stuff to like start paying the government even more. It was like taxes started going up, and it was so confusing. And because of the annexation, basically Palestine and Israel cut relations. They cut this thing called Tansik. And when they cut that, Palestine doesn't get their like taxes from Israel, and they don't get their money from Israel. So a cutback because of lockdown. So there's no money because people are not going to work, but then also not getting the money you would have received, your only income as a government, because you depend entirely on Israel. There's just no money going around. And so there was a lot of political tension. And I think the only reason people weren't taking it up with the government is because they know that the government is also very weak. Like, the last thing anyone needs is a civil situation going on like that between their people. But,
so I didn't realize that. So Israel funds the Palestinian government?
Yeah, so all the money that goes into the Palestinian government is entirely dependent on Israel. Any taxes, everything has to go through this whole procedure, and it goes through Israel before it gets to Palestine. So when you cut Tansik and you cut relations with Israel, Israel holds that back, does not give that to you. So obviously it's a I think Palestine cut relation with Israel because they were like, oh, this is an annexation. This is us saying we don't want any sort of relations with you. But then obviously Palestine's very dependent on it. So eventually they were going to have to be like, hey, no, we do want relations with you, actually. Now that we realize it. But obviously with cutting relations means you can't use their airport, which is the only reason I could not go through their airport till December. I was in Palestine for 9 months. I've been meaning to go back since August. And I would apply and not get a refund and get my ticket canceled over and over again until December 3rd, which I found out within 20 hours that, yeah, you can go. It was a mess, but.
And so the annexation, so is that a regular thing that happens?
Yes, generally speaking, they don't need to announce an annexation because there is an annexation like at all times. They create new roads, um, destroy a few houses, and it's a in Palestine, which is what I always talk about in Palestinian media, which is not the greatest outlet and it's not very, heard of. Um, you will find out like, okay, this house got demolished today, this neighborhood has this happening today. You don't find that on like the general media with the international world and everything, because it's not unusual, because
Yeah.
because it's an everyday thing. No one wants to announce something that's already happened yesterday and the day before. That's not interesting. So it's very usual, but when Israel announced their annexation, Palestinians were like, see, like we're telling
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
there's an annexation, but also Trump endorsed it. So there was this whole thing where it was like, yeah, we're going to take the biggest chunk out of Palestine. And even though they said, okay, we won't do annexation anymore, at the end to the public, they still went on with it, and
Right.
they cut off water to certain villages, and they still went on with a lot of the annexation. They built this new road that completely segregates like Palestinian and Israeli. Midway through summer, we find out that there's a new bus line that decided that Palestinians get on a certain bus, but Israelis have to get another bus. The whole
Really?
2020. It's, but it was, the pandemic was used as, okay, everyone's in panic, time to, you know,
Profit,
to
and not profit, but like time to implement
and
distracting things that and make things, do things that people won't notice, probably.
100%, 100%.
Um, so you and I should have probably prefaced this earlier, and I've said this before, like of all the places in the world I'm familiar with, the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, all of those areas are just completely, which is I definitely want to learn more, and particularly because I'm from the United States and I understand the United States has a lot of power in those places.
100%.
Um, it is so. So I guess just forgive my naivety. I've interviewed someone from Israel. I've interviewed another person from Palestine. I would like to think that I'm more aware, but there's still things I don't completely, I guess, understand. Like the idea of so. Would you say there's segregation? Like, is there like a Palestine area and a Israeli area, like in
Yeah,
places?
they obviously I don't want to like get political, but too right. But it's a well-known fact, and if you visit Palestine yourself and like you experience it, like you internationally recognize it's an apartheid state. So
Okay.
with an apartheid state comes segregated roads. So obviously we will take like a 3-hour road to a place that could be 20 minutes far, but a settlement that's right by us will get this straight, clean, newly built road to the settlement, but we're not allowed to go through that road. So we have different roads. There's two different road systems that we're not allowed to take because there's a checkpoint at those roads and they don't let us through. Cars, there's a yellow plated car, which is an Israeli car, and we have a white plated car, a Palestinian car.
Right.
A yellow plated car can travel freely from A to Z of Palestine, literally from the river to the sea. You can travel by car with a yellow plated car. With a
Israelis
white,
can in Palestine.
yes,
Right.
they
Right.
can travel freely through Palestine. White plated cars, on the other hand, can travel within the West Bank, and they have to go through the checkpoint, and it's like 7% of what that yellow plated car can go through. It's this whole thing. I don't even it's not it's not a matter of who's right, who's wrong. It's not a matter of, oh, two state, one state, who do you support, what do you support. It's undeniable, at least the segregation, at
Yes.
least
Yes.
there,
And that is
there
not fair. It's not fair. No.
whatsoever. This form of supremacy that is just so prominent. Like you will always feel like the lower being when you're around. Like I said, like in the airports, like I'm just gonna have to, oh my god, good, I'm so glad I just went to an interrogation room as a Palestinian because I'm a Palestinian. Like the second they see your passport, I'm so glad that's all you did today. Like, do you understand? Like the standard is
Right.
so low and the expectations are so low, and then when I get back to the UK, I'm like, wait, that's not the normal. Like I had to remind myself, wait, that's not normal. You're not supposed to be treated like a second class citizen. You're not supposed to be treated like you're not on the same level of human. But
Are
I That's the basis of it, the segregation.
Are you allowed, are Palestinians allowed to travel freely in Israel?
No, you're supposed to get a permit, which is what the Israeli airport permit, for example, that's one of the hardest permits to get. But a permit to Israel itself, you have to apply like 2-3 weeks before, and then you might get it for like a day, you might get it for a week, you might get it for a month, depends on how giving they are. And then it's from a certain time to a certain time, and you go through Israel or through certain parts. It's based on the permit itself. But most of like when we used to go field trips, for example, in school, right? So like if you're a senior, high school senior, you a lot of like we'd get really excited because our field trip sometimes could be Israel, and we're like, okay, like a change, like an interesting trip. And then we'd be so disappointed because the school would apply for our permits, and there'd be a day where they'd come back and they're like, okay, we're going to tell you who's allowed to go. And it's so disappointing because you're like, oh, my friend couldn't make it. Like, oh, my friend couldn't get a permit. It's so common and it's so normal back home. But then when I get to the UK, literally just my experience in university made me realize, wait, that's not normal.
Yeah.
And it's so weird when I think about it, but I genuinely think my experience in the UK is the only thing that made me go, you guys don't have checkpoints between each city? Like, I genuinely find it so odd every time. Like, I go, let's say, between London and Colchester. I'm like, wait, you guys went quickly. That was quick. That was very quick. Like, it's
fascinating. So interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And just I think a lot of times when you do get to be in a privileged existence like the United States, the UK, you truly can't even fathom how much worse it could be in other places. And that's why it's so great, Masa, to talk to you and I mean, just hear these types of stories. I really want to learn more about things like this because you hear it and you read it, but when you hear a first person account about it, it can be really confronting. Do you, so when you were talking about these checkpoints, so what about Israelis coming to Palestine? Do they have to have similar permits to come to Palestine?
No, they don't need a permit, but at the entrance of like Palestinian, which is zone A or in like their terminology, there's like a sign that says, if you're Israeli, you are not allowed to enter, roar. But they enter. Like they enter. And a lot of the time we have like at 4 a.m. settlers will like go into like Ramallah, like our West Bank city, and they'll vandalize cars and they'll do this and do that. But then because also to go on with apartheid, Palestinians fall under military law. There is no sort of civil law whatsoever. So even for the most minor things, military law is very different than civil law. So you can't have a flag out legally. You can't have your Palestinian flag out if we're going to get into the law, right? That's not legal. But obviously people do it, but because there's too many, that's the only reason. But if you're going to get into the legalities of it, you're not allowed to. So Israelis go under civil law. So even Palestinian Israelis, so a Palestinian Israeli, for example, can go into Palestine and he can do whatever he wants and they can't hold him accountable.
Right, because he's both.
Yeah, right. Because he's Israeli as well. So we can't do anything, which is why some Palestinian Israelis obviously sometimes will like, drive really fast and then the police can't really do much. Like you know what I mean? Like it's
And are the police quite like ruthless with, like if you said the white license plate that Palestinians have, if you were to break the law and drive on a road that you shouldn't, would you definitely get in trouble?
Yeah, you usually wouldn't make it to that road because the checkpoint will stop you.
Right.
So the checkpoint just see the plate and then be like, okay, you're really comfortable right now. Like, why are you comfortable? Like, where's your permit? And then obviously check your trunk, check everything, and then they don't like you, they turn you back. It's actually really odd. This summer there was like a couple of checkpoints that were moving around, and they put one really close to my house, which is very odd because we're like in the middle of Ramallah. Like it's like closing in. Because on the news it says, oh, annexation, but in real life, and I've said this to my friends, I'm like, you genuinely feel it closing in. Like you can seriously feel a checkpoint and a checkpoint closing in. But yeah, they don't need permits. They can just walk in, even though legally, or like what's announced is they can't, but they do.
Right.
They do every couple days.
There's a lot to think about and unpack, and I will try to keep it pandemic related, although I do think just what's happened with the pandemic, as you mentioned, is relevant in the way that, I guess, the inequality that Palestine experiences. What about vaccinations? I was curious about that. I think I saw Israel secured a lot of vaccines. Yeah.
Yeah, they secured vaccines, but Palestine couldn't. And so for Palestine right now back home, I don't think there's anything yet decided. I think someone said something about the government being interested in the Russian one, in the Russian vaccine, but I don't think many people want that. I don't know. There's just this vibe that people prefer the Pfizer one that's going around. That people are taking. But Israeli Palestinians are getting vaccinated. So I know a few Israeli Palestinians, and they're getting vaccinated. But obviously, if you're Palestinian, you're not going to get vaccinated. So none of the Palestinians that I know got vaccinated.
Did you know a lot of people who caught COVID or had COVID in Palestine? Yeah.
The circle started closing in towards the end, like the family. Yeah. A lot of family members started getting it. Sometimes it'd be minor, like some people would be like, "Whoa, I have antibodies. I didn't even know I caught it." And then they'd get COVID again eventually and do whatever. But I know that I do have like a family member that was really like affected by it, and it was a very tough moment for them, and like health wise it was just really sad. But
yeah. Do you, and it's a funny thing because it's like, I mean, I have this question for you about things going back to normal, but it sounds like a lot of things that you have witnessed in your life aren't really normal anyway. Yeah. So maybe a better question would be like, what do you hope happens in the future?
There's a lot of things. Like there's a lot of things someone could hope, but obviously I said this to my dad actually like 2 days ago, but because I think things after COVID will be less, there'll be less need for face-to-face, because a lot of jobs right now as well, they're like saying like everything's on Zoom, like interviews on Zoom, everything on Zoom. And I think that a lot of jobs are genuinely closing down their offices because they're saying, you know, you can do everything at home. So I think I want to go back home and be able to have similar job opportunities as anyone else, because you can do it at home. Do you get what I mean? It's more accessible. So I don't want to be stuck with the limitations.
So you don't want to stay in the UK?
I don't really have an option. My visa expires soon.
Would you if you could?
I feel like I'd have to go back home, but then go back. I feel like they say I'd have to give myself a check and go travel, stay there for a while and come back to Palestine. But I'd have to eventually go back to Palestine because there's so little of us, and you know.
Yeah. It's like, do you think, and you mentioned studying law, I wondered if that is kind of intentions with addressing some of this inequality that you have lived with. Would that be one of your goals?
100%.
Yeah.
I've literally decided to study law in a model UN conference that I hosted that had like they like threw a tear gas bomb thingy into the conference randomly, and I was like, okay, yeah, I was public speaking as well, and I was just like, I can't do, like I was just so furious.
Sorry, what happened? Could you
I had a conference, and I was the one, like I was the MUN chair, so the model UN chair, and I was hosting that.
This is in Palestine?
Yeah, we were high school as well. We were like 11th grade. And then I think there was clashes between a bunch of kids and the checkpoint, and kids were throwing rocks at the checkpoint. And obviously when, you know, you piss them off, they go around the area and they start throwing like tear gas. And one landed like literally right at the conference like window. It was just poof into the conference. We were like, okay, canceled. we'll continue this next day. So it was just I started liking public speaking from Model UN, and it was a very like upsetting time. So I feel like I was like, yeah, law it is. Law's the one.
But how inspiring that tragic moment made you feel like, all right, my country needs me.
I can't lose it. Yeah, I applied for actually I wanted to study in the US initially. Political science. George Washington University was like the dream. And then I found out about the UK and like how law can be an undergrad, and I was like, yeah, maybe that could be the basis. But yeah.
Wow. Well, Masa, you are an inspiration. You're very young and you have dealt with some shit. So I am very impressed and inspired by what you just told me. We didn't have long, but is there anything else you want to say before we wrap things up? I feel like I could learn a lot more if I kept going.
You. Nothing. That's about it.
If anybody, do you have a Twitter account or a way to be found, or are you gonna wait till you graduate, or before you start?
Just wait till I graduate
before you can start the campaigns. All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I hope it wasn't too intense. Some of the things we talked about were quite serious, so I really appreciate you being so honest with me, and it's really enlightening, and I hope that a lot of people watch this and can understand some of the things that maybe not everyone realizes. So, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.